So today we're going to look at solar studies. It's one of my more favorite topics because I like to think of it as a bit of eye candy, even though it's vitally important when designing a building to get a good sense of where, when positioning the building on the site, where you can maximize sun exposure. So I have a building on a site, and what I want to do is I want to look at three sun studies. One is going to be from a standard 3D view of the building on the site. One is going to be an exterior perspective view, i.e. created with a camera, and one from the interior. So some of these processes might take a little time, but visually it's definitely worth the time. In the project browser, I have already created 3D views. You can see over here, but what I want to do is I want to create, haven't saved recently, so there you go. I want to look at this in 3D, and you can sort of see what it looks like. I want to take that AutoCAD file, and I'm going to hide it in view. It's a bit of a complex model because it is a model produced by the senior students in the architectural drafting program. And so we will be looking at some of the work as a part of this. So I just picked a random position here, and we're going to focus our attention down here in our view status bar, or sorry, view display bar. And we have a symbol, looks like the sun, with an X, and we have a symbol that looks like a sphere, and that's for the shadowing. So for this all to sort of work, shadowing is a good thing to have turned on, and you can see that automatically. You can see some aspects have been shadowed. It's making an assumption here of the location of the sun and the time of day. We're going to get specific with that. Now, the sun setting, we have, when you click on that, we have two options for turning the sun path on or off, and it's currently off, or sun settings. And that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time during this discussion. But let's see what happens when you turn the sun path on. So it's going to ask us, the sun will not display because the relative to view is selected in the sun settings. I'm going to cancel this because, well, actually no, I'm going to use specific project location, time, and date instead. If I cancel this and I go to the view ribbon, actually sorry, it's the manage ribbon. You should see a project location panel. The first item allows you to specify, or the first button lets you specify where your building is. If you had an actual address, you could type it in, but we've got location where you could type it in. You have, and what this option here, internet mapping versus default city. Internet mapping allows you to be specific by typing in a location, whereas default city will give you a message or a dialog box where you could type in a location. Now, if you type in a location, you're going to find Dartmouth is not actually on the list. It's only showing up here because I used internet mapping service. This is just a message about energy analysis, so I should actually turn that off because we're not doing that as a part of this. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to go back down to our sun icon and go to sun path on. Now this is a very complex model, and I am going to, let me just hit that again. And of course, oh, here we go, zoom out. So this is the compass showing you visually which way is north. And we do have We should be able to see the sun, but it's not displaying. But in the documentation, you can see what that would look like. With this sun path, we can actually see at a specific time where that sun is located, and we could click and drag the sun along the arc of that. So I'm going to turn the sun path off, and now I'm going to go to sun settings. Before I do that, though, I'm going to zoom in a little closer here, and I'm going to go to sun settings. So we have 4 options here: still, single day, multi-day, and lighting. Still allows you, by picking the location, date, and time, get a snapshot picture of what the lighting would look like in the building, or around the building, at that specific date and time. Down in this section here, we can define how the shadowing is displayed based on levels. If you uncheck ground plane level, what will happen is the shadowing will actually follow the contours of the property. So it's a more realistic sort of appearance, not perhaps at this zoom magnification, but as we proceed, maybe with closer zooms where we can actually see more detail of the contours, it might look a little clearer. But it's going to take a little bit more time to generate. So I'm going to do a still study with today's date, and I'm going to use the time, which is the time that I've actually started this video. You'll also see we have summer solstice, winter solstice, so we can actually do still studies at the 4 major times of the year, where the beginning of spring, summer, fall, and winter will be where the sun will be located. So if I click OK, you can see that things changed. The shadowing changed. So this is showing us what the shadowing looks like at this date and time. So if I go to sun settings again, let me change this to say 4 p.m. You're going to hear me saying 4 p.m. a lot because I like to be standard or be consistent with the settings that I use as a reference. So now you can see how the shadowing is with 4 p.m. So you can see it's a bit of a difference. So now let's take a look at, I'm going to zoom in a little more so we can see a little more detail. Let's take a look at single day. This lets us create a little video showing the shadowing as it changes throughout the day. So we could be specific with the beginning of the video and the end of the video as far as time is concerned, but I think it's more accurate to say sunrise to sunset. Time interval. So what we could do is we could take snapshots at every hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, or 15 minutes. For this initial one, I'll just pick 1 hour, and I'm going to uncheck ground plane level and click OK. So this is the shadowing at sunrise. Now, in order to be able to see the actual animation of the shadow, we need to go back down to our solar path icon again. And now when we click on that, you'll see we've got a preview solar study option. When we select that in our options bar, we have an option to play. And so if we hit play, you can actually watch how the shadowing changes at different times of the day. And then it returns back to the original. Let's make a change. Let's go to sun settings again, and let's change it to every half hour, 30 minutes. And now if we go to play, you'll see that the transition is smoother. And if we actually went all the way to 15 minutes, it would be even smoother. it is possible to export this. And when we go to our interior perspective, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. And just for the sake of doing it, I'm not going to do this for every example, but I'm going to set this to 15 minutes. And notice right here it has frames, which is great because it's dependent on the time interval. And now if we hit play, and of course it's taking a little more time. Now, the next one we're going to look at is going to be the sun study for year. Just give this a second to complete. Shouldn't be too much longer because and it will return us back to sunrise, which is the earlier fully shaded, almost fully shaded model. So let's take a look at sun settings. The other option, the next option we have is multi-day. Now, multi-day allows us to show the difference in shadowing throughout multiple days, because the orientation of the sun is different towards the Earth plane at different times of the year. So if we wanted to, we could select any of the predefined options. We could do winter, just winter, fall, summer, and spring. We could be just specific with a beginning date and an end date. We can, what I want to do is I want to select 1 year, just so we can see what that looks like. Well, actually, maybe not, because now what I see, if I pick sunrise to sunset, it will, just 1 sec here. Excuse me. The 1 year study frames every hour. Will probably give us well, we have to define when the beginning of this will be. So let's say January 1st to December 31st. You're going to see there are a lot of frames involved. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time with generating this, because it will take some time. But we can change the time interval. We could say we want it for every hour, day, week, or month. So let's do every day. So there'll be 365 frames. And I'm going to uncheck the ground plane level. And what I'll probably do is when I start this, I will, when I click OK, I'll pause the video just to save time. Okay. So I'm going to click OK. And now if I hit play, actually maybe I won't pause, because you can see it's every day and the time is the same time. So you can see what the effect is throughout the year with the different, the positioning of the sun and so on. And this is, by the way, my, my display that's flashing. I think it's buffering, so the display is displaying faster than the buffering is collecting data. So you can see what this looks like. It is now up to frame 95, so we're about 25-ish% through. So I'm going to just let that keep going for a second. As I already mentioned, you do have the ability to export this to an animation file or a video file like AVI, MPG, and several other file formats. I specifically have not set the visual style to anything other than just 2D wireframe, because of the fact that with colors involved, then you're going to have a longer generation of the video. So now the shadowing seems to have stopped. We're a little more than halfway through the year. Now we're going to start to see it significantly change again because the orientation of the sun is, in reference to the planet, to Earth, is going to be changing again more significantly. So we have just about, if you look here, you can see 265, 6, 7, 8. So it is going faster. And because we specified 1 year with 1 day intervals, this will stop at 365. If we were to have set it to 1 hour, it would have been a lot smoother. It would have taken a while to generate, but we could have then exported it to a movie file or video file, and that would be a lot smoother. Okay, so we're done. So, like I said, I'm going to hold off on the video side of things until we get to the interior sun studies. So let's take a look at our exterior perspective. So I created a view. Here's what it looks like. And just note, yes, I realize that the arrows which identify direction of traffic are floating. That is because of the nature of those components that were used were not particularly good for placing on the surface of the pavement. It looks great in plan view, which was what was most important. But when you look at this in 3D view or perspective view, you can really see issues. So let's take a look at sun settings. Still, I'll use, I'll do the 4 p.m. Click OK. Well, that was actually the setting for the initial view. So let me just change that. And we can right click as well. Oops, I selected the building, so right click is probably not. Depending on the command, we can right click to access these commands, or the sun settings commands. So let's change this to 9 a.m. So you can see what the shadowing is on the exterior of the building at that particular time. So let's take a look at single day, sunrise to sunset. I'll set this to every 30 minutes for the interval. I'll uncheck ground plane level, and we'll click OK. So this is first thing in the morning. And if I go to my sun icon, I can preview, click play. And we can see how the shadowing changes throughout the day. Okay, so that's done. I won't bother doing a finer interval for that. Again, going back to the sun settings, multi-day, 1 year solar study. I'm going to do 1 week just to make this go a little faster. And then we can hit play again. So this is what it looks like at this time. It's hard to see, but you can see things are getting lighter. So it's interesting. This is the same time of the day, 1 week apart. So you can see what the significant difference the time of the year will make when you're doing a solar study. And now we are past the halfway mark for the year, and things are getting darker again at this particular time. The time for this is almost 9 a.m. It's 8:54 a.m. And that brings us back to the beginning. All right, so let's take a look at the interior perspective. So I picked this view right here. This is where I created the camera. And I'm not skipping over lighting. I just found that lighting doesn't always work well. It depends on the light fixtures and how they're designed. I find I don't see a huge difference, but lighting is supposed to show you what the lighting looks like within the space if you have lights installed. The lights in this particular view don't seem to have much of an effect, so I'm not going to bother showing that. So let's take a look at the still. Let's set this to 9 a.m. Today's date, Dartmouth, uncheck ground plane at level. Click OK. Well, I guess that's irrelevant because we do not see the contours of the topography, but that's okay. So this is what the space looks like at 9 a.m. If we go and have a look at 4 p.m., I'll just use a keyboard for this. So you can see that the space has much better lighting in the afternoon than it does in the morning. Just out of curiosity, let's have a look at noon. Okay, so that's what it looks like at noon. So let's do single day. Sunrise to sunset. I'll set it to 30 minutes for the interval. Uncheck ground plane at level, just to be consistent. Today's date, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We'll click OK. So this is sunrise, so it's very dark. We can go back down to the sun icon, go to Preview Solar Study, hit play, and watch the show. Seems to be taking a little more time. Probably because the visual style here is shaded, so colors are there and so on. If we take a look at the multi-day, 1 year, and time interval, we'll do 1 week just to save time. Again, it's early in the day, so I wanted you to see more significantly what the lighting is like in a space at different times of the year. And there we are. So those are all the different options that are available. And so next thing I want to show you is how to export. So let's try to make this a little more, I won't say spectacular, but because we're going to create or define our time interval, sunrise to sunset, the date and location, uncheck ground plane level, and click OK. So we don't actually have to play this, because when you go to the File pull-down menu and go to Export, we have, if you scroll down the list, Images and Animations, and you can pick Solar Study. Here's where we can define the speed at which the video will progress. So we could say all frames, which we do want. Or we could identify frame range. Frames per second. Here it shows us how long it will be, the video, 4 seconds if we use 15 frames per second. Let's bump that up to 30. Now you see the number has reduced because it's going to take each snapshot at each 15-minute interval and do 30 of them in a second. So that's why that's showing up that way. Let's bump that down to, just so we can actually see the animation, 5 frames per second. We can define which visual style we want. I'm hesitant to pick realistic because it might take a while, but the heck with it. And we can define the size of the frames if we wish, or we can just leave the defaults, which we will. This is width, this is height, or we can just pick a zoom feature. We could have it include the time and date stamp with each slide. I'm not going to bother with that. If I click OK, it will then ask me to identify a name and a location for saving. Here's where we could pick the different types of video files. And I was mistaken. What it does is only gives us the opportunity to save it as an AVI file. These are all for individual JPEG, BMP, GIF files for each frame. So be careful with that. Save. So it's chugging away. If you look at the bottom left, we have to now define video compression. So I'm going to say OK just for that. In the bottom left, okay, I'm going to pause this because I have a dog barking, and plus this is going to take a little time. So bear with me. Okay, that took about 15 minutes, and the time will vary depending on what settings you choose. So it saved the Solar Study as an AVI file. So I'm going to go to the folder in which it was saved. Here's the file right here. If I double click on it, you can see what it looks like. I'll play it again. And that is how you generate solar studies.